let me just go into the details of what I'm going to talk about here. And this is something quite different, I think, from what I've seen. I've looked at the previous meetings in the committee, and this is a totally different approach that I'm presenting now. So I hope that it's going to be interesting to some of you, and hopefully as many as possible. What I'm going to talk about is basically something I've been exploring over the past couple of months, which is how we can use AI to this in qualitative analysis and to support decision making. So that's going to be the subject of my presentation. I'll start by just a very brief discussion of what we've had so far with the quantitative models and the limitations of those. Then I'll give a short introduction of what logical qualitative analysis is, and then go into some examples showing how we can use AI to support us in building qualitative analysis. And I'll then briefly discuss the relevance to FP&A and talk about the next steps for those who are interested in exploring this area, which is a very interesting one, I think. And then just wrap it up and take questions and have discussion. So in quantitative models, and this is probably something that I'm telling you that you all already know, is what we're doing with AI and machine learning in qualitative models to understand trends, discover correlations, and very importantly, I think, to take the bias out of predictions. We also want to save time, and we want to be able to be more agile, for example, by moving from annual budgeting to rolling forecasts. And we're using historical data to do this, internal historical data, external data, big data, which is always formalized data that we use. So the main limitations of those models, they have to do with, of course, the availability of historical data and the quality of the data. So as somebody said, garbage in, garbage out, and so we've got to have high quality data to be able to use for modeling. Also, it's common that we draw the conclusion of causation from correlations that we see, and that can lead us to wrong decisions. But the most important thing perhaps here, the most important limitation of quantitative analysis is that it doesn't really take the tacit knowledge into account. We only have the information that we can plug into databases, but all the intuitive knowledge, experience, values, whatever that we have as humans, is not taken into account when we're building quantitative models. And but this is actually when it comes to decision making, and of course in the end, I think we can all agree that the purpose of FP&A is basically to help management make better decisions. And decision making is to such a large extent based on qualitative data or qualitative information and tacit information, basically. So the breakthrough that I see that we have now with the advent of the natural language models, such as ChatGPT, which is by far the most popular one of those, is that we can now actually expand the use of AI into qualitative analysis and to vastly improve, and this is what I've seen already from just a few experiments that I've done, to vastly improve the quality of our analysis and the quality of our decisions. So ChatGPT it's basically a neural network that's trained on a vast amount of data running up to September 2021. This is actually just for fun. It's his answer or its answer or her answer. I don't know what pronouns it uses, asking what you are, and it uses basically this information that's been trained on to predict, and it answers questions by predicting what comes next in a sentence. That's the technology behind it, those models basically are going to cause disruption everywhere, not only in management, but everywhere in society. And we're only seeing really the tip of the iceberg yet. What is changing now is that we have AI models that are accessible to all, that we can communicate with in natural language. We can ask questions, we can let's evaluate propositions and so on, and just using natural language. We don't need any software, we just need a browser to use this. And we're already seeing it making inroads into more or less all areas in society. And it will be used extensively for decision making in a different way than what we have now. And for FP&A, it is going to be a very important change, I think. Many people see this as a threat, but of course, you know, it may be a threat to some. But what I see in it is basically the ability to vastly improve our analysis and our decisions. So what does that mean? It means that the ability to effectively prompt those models or communicate with those models is going to be very important. I was actually discussing this with my son, who is a university student, the other day, who's studying philosophy and computer science. We were talking about the implications of AI and what's going to change. And he said to me, well, you know, the ability to prompt those models is going to be the make or break in the next few years. It's going to make all the difference whether you can do that, whether you're able to do that effectively or not. If you're not, you're going to be left behind. If you are, you're going to be on top. So that's, and I think he's right. And from what I've seen, it just strengthens that belief. So what does it take really to be able to do this? It takes clarity of thinking. We have to be able to think clearly. We have to be able to think critically and think clearly. We have to be able to articulate ourselves clearly, and we have to be able to precisely and accurately understand the concepts we use. And this, in the context of the AI, it's going to be very important also to understand when we have a different understanding of a concept from the AI. We have to be able to identify that. And we have to understand the structure of the model, how it works, and the limitations of it. And apart from the communication prompting, we also, in my opinion, will have to be able to use structured analysis to really make use of it in decision making and in analysis. So logical qualitative analysis, what is it? So I'm going to talk basically about it from the perspective of the method that I use, which is called the logical thinking process. It is people-driven rather than data-driven. It's qualitative. It is about logical reasoning, not calculation so much. It's a systemic approach to the organization or to society or to the environment basically that we're dealing with. And just to give you an overview, I'm not going to go deep into this. I will just give you some examples of analysis that we do, and you can read up on it. You'll be provided with, of course, links to books and so on for that. But basically what it is about is we start by defining a goal for, let's say, the organization. And what is critical what are the critical success factors that we have to achieve to achieve or to basically reach our goals. Then we look at those factors and we ask, are we achieving this? And if we're not, we do root cause analysis of what we need, what's causing us, what's preventing us from achieving those factors. Very often, the root causes contain some sort of conflict. And so the next step, when we have a conflict, it's not always, but very often, then we use a logical approach to solve the conflict. Then we move on to what we have to do, and we do again a logical analysis of how a precise action is going to lead to the desired outcome. And then we move on to sort of a project plan, basically. I'm just going to give you a little example of what we mean by when we talk about systemic analysis. And think back to the spring of 2020. We had COVID, we had lockdowns, and you know, in the spring, people started to be more optimistic. Restrictions were being released, and so on, and many people thought we're through this. If you think back, you remember that probably. So I was a bit skeptical about that. So I did this analysis just to try and clarify to myself what was probably going to happen. And so if we just start at the bottom, we have a new and highly contagious virus spreading through society, and we believe this virus is quite dangerous. We believe also that lockdowns will halt infections. So we impose lockdowns. If this and this and this is true, then this must be true, basically. And with the lockdowns, they limit infections a lot, and that means a very low percentage of people get infected. Only those infected can become immune. So the ratio of immune people is only going to rise very, very little. Those who are not immune will be able to get infected, so the majority of people are susceptible to infection. Okay, so this is the first part here. What happens also is, with the lockdowns, economic activity is reduced, which means that fiscal revenues go down and costs go up, personal income falls. The government tries to counter those effects, which means eventually that the government lifts the restrictions. And as some people are still carrying the virus and they can infect others, the majority of people become infected. So infections will rise again, and we're going back down here to the lockdowns. So I did this, I think it was late April 2020. I showed it to a couple of people, and let me tell you, their reaction told me basically, you're just going to keep this for yourself for the time being, because people just wouldn't believe it. And even if, you know, this very logical, robust analysis shows precisely what's going to happen. And of course it happened. But this was about the time when this happened also. This is in Prague in July 2020. People are celebrating the victory over COVID. So that was the situation then. So basically what we're doing here is we're analyzing a situation based on the facts that we have at hand and what must actually, what must happen if this happens. That's basically what we're doing. So the logical thinking process, which is the tool, that methodology that I use, the characteristics, it's a systemic approach, just like the analysis I showed you earlier. It makes use of the tacit knowledge we have, and it's based on strict logical rules. And we use it to discover hidden causes for problems, to solve conflicts, and to identify unintended consequences before they happen. It is a very challenging approach because it's really intellectually demanding, it's time consuming, and you need to use visual methods to actually use it. If we took this and plugged it into text form, everybody would give up trying to read through, probably. So until now, we've been using explicit data to drive to use for AI in FP&A. But the natural language models are going to expand very much the usefulness of this to speed up the qualitative analysis and, very importantly, to help improve logical connections. In fact, the logical connections, the quality of the logical connections is of huge importance in doing an analysis like this. If the connections aren't logically valid, the analysis isn't sound, and it will lead us to wrong decisions, basically. So the example I'm going to start with here is the root cause analysis, or what we call current reality tree analysis. It's based on the assumptions that what we usually call problems are actually symptoms of underlying systemic root causes, and that to eliminate a symptom, it is not enough to attack the symptom. We must identify and remove the systemic root cause. Those root causes are very often just some hidden assumptions, and more often than not, actually just articulating the assumption is the key to the solution. Doing root cause analysis that doesn't adhere to logical rigor only confirms our existing bias. And actually, when it comes to AI, getting rid of the bias in qualitative analysis is one of the really big points that AI is going to bring to improve it. So the example here, this is actually taken out of my book, From Symptoms to Causes, and it's just a thought up, simple example where I'll just take you through it very quickly. We're running a specialized hospital, and we're trying to to minimize costs, basically. So what we do is we look at the costs, and we see that we have relatively high payroll. So we want to limit that. And what we do is we invent a KPI that's salary per person per department, and we want to minimize that. So what we do is we minimize the salary per person, and if competitors do not use those same policies, we pay lower salaries than the competition. And this, in the end, leads us to lower quality people, people with less experience. The good people leave for the competitors. We have to keep hiring. We have a higher employee turnover, so we have to spend more money on training. And the lower salary is not offsetting the cost of more staff and more training. So we end up with actually a higher payroll in total than the competition, which again drives us, because of this KPI we have, to again try to further minimize the payroll cost. So it's a vicious cycle, in fact, and it ends up with worsening financial results. The simple example of how a faulty KPI can drive destructive behavior. So now we're looking at one part of this analysis, which is basically this. If we hire people with little experience and inexperienced people work slower, then we have to hire more people. So we start by plugging this into ChatGPT and asking it about the validity of this conclusion, or this statement, basically. If we hire inexperienced people and inexperienced people work slower than experienced people, we must hire more people. And the answer we get is that the statement is not logically valid. But when we look at the answer in more detail, we see that we get this answer because the AI thinks that we are asserting that inexperienced people work slower than experienced people. While when we read this, we do not understand it that way. We understand it as a premise. So this is maybe just the first thing we have to think about when we're communicating with the AI, is the clarity of the questions that we give it. So if we change the question just a little bit, and we add the if in here, and if inexperienced people work slower, then we get a different answer. And now we're just asking about the logical validity of the statement, nothing else. So we have to keep on here. And the question actually that we want to have an answer to is if there are any other conditions that have to be fulfilled for the conclusion to be true. So we ask now, if we hire inexperienced people and if they work slower than experienced people, does it necessarily follow that we must hire more people? What other conditions must be fulfilled for this to be true? And now the AI gives us a couple of suggestions actually. And the suggestion that to us looks most relevant has to do with workload. It has to do with capacity. And now we discover that in our analysis here, we've been tacitly assuming this, that we don't have excess capacity. Because for this to hold, if we had lots of overcapacity, it wouldn't really matter. Hiring people with little experience and them working slower, it wouldn't really matter. We have to also assume that we don't have the excess capacity. So this is an example of how we can use the AI to improve a logical analysis. And when we look at this, if actually this factor is missing, it means basically that the conclusion is also not valid. And basically, the whole analysis is invalid. So it's important when we're doing analysis like this. And I've done, I've used this on several examples of root cause analysis, and very often we find that something is missing from the analysis. Whether it's as important as this is different, but there's always something missing. And this is because of the bias. This is because of something that we tacitly assume, but we don't articulate it. And so we maybe never explore actually and check if we really have it. So this is pretty important, and and we see from this example how big improvements we can get from using the AI for this. Here's another example of simplifying statements. Here we have this is just a small piece from a current reality tree done by one of our students in the training course that we're running, me and Bill Detmer. And this has to do with the causes why workers in a factory don't wear the appropriate safety gear. And now I'm asking basically the AI to take this and plug it in as a logical statement and ask the AI to simplify it. It's very useful for this also. So we see the example here. So this is basically what I plugged in, the whole logical statement, and this is what we get, the simplification. And this is basically valid. It's totally valid logically. And for somebody to read it, we just see how long it would take us to read this and to form it in our minds and so on, and to realize if it's valid or not, compared with this, which is the output of the AI. And this just happens in a few seconds. It would take us much longer to do. So moving on to a second example here, future reality tree analysis. What is that? To start with, when we do project plans, we set up a sequence of actions, but we do not actually determine the logical cause-effect relationships between them. And this is why, based on my experience, I've come to the conclusion that we should always do a future reality tree analysis before we set up a project plan, or even just to set up a project plan and then to analyze it logically before we embark on the project, because this tool is something we use to identify, any missing premises, any unintended consequences that we might not see, and what is going to actually lead from the actions that we take. What is positive? What is negative? What additional actions do we have to take to get where we want? And using AI for this is great help, because the AI, again, doesn't have a bias. It doesn't hope for the best. It's just very, very rational. So it's a great tool to help us unearth unintended consequences before we start implementing a project plan. Here's an example of this. So this is also taken from a student exercise or analysis. So we have, and it's this connection that I'm focusing on here. And we'll just take this and we'll just, so what we're saying here is basically, if excess inventories for parts that are not supply constrained is avoided, then excess inventory is progressively reduced and avoided. And now we want to check if this is enough, to lead to that. So let's look at what the AI has to say. So we ask the question, and we get suggested additional premises that might be needed for this to hold true. And what we focus on here is this part. It's the overproduction, excessive ordering, etc. Now, if we look again at the analysis, we see immediately how this is needed to actually strengthen and validify it. So, in addition to avoiding the excess inventories for parts that are not supply constrained, we also need to make sure that material supply is done for smaller quantities at regular intervals. And that way, we're going to progressively reduce and avoid excess inventory. So this is a way to use it for that type of analysis. So basically, if we come to then what this all has to do with FP&A. So let's think about the evolution of FP&A. Starting out as descriptive analytics, basically report generation, and moving to what we have now, which is business partnering. And the purpose of it, of course, is to facilitate decision making. We base the decisions on two types of information, on explicit information and tacit information. And optimal decision making has to be based on both of those. Historically, qualitative analysis has been a weak spot. There are several reasons for this. Using really structured approach of qualitative analysis is hard to do. It takes a lot of training, and it is time consuming, and it's always prone to bias. Now, in order to really improve the decisions we make, we have to improve the qualitative analysis. Improving that is a very important step forward. And for this, we need a structured approach. And now, with the advent of the natural language models, we can really make advantage of AI to speed up and to improve our qualitative analysis and thus our decision making. So it's a game changer in my mind. The AI is a true game changer when it comes to all of this, and that's the main implication, I think, for FP&A and for management in general, of course. So if you want to explore this further, what are the next steps? First, to identify relevant structured approach. Structured approach to analysis is very important when we're using this. So evaluate the approaches that you think might be useful, and select what you're comfortable with, and train yourself using it. Then explore the possibilities offered by the AI, and I would recommend just using this chat GPT. It's the most commonly used tool, and it's very powerful. The fourth generation of it is very powerful. And then practice on your own problems. Select some problems that are relevant, that are important, but that are not huge, and start with those. Start small scale, and then just practice. That's really the way forward with this. So the key takeaways, basically, the way I see this, and I've just did a little diagram here to demonstrate it. So in order to be a valuable business partner, we need to be able to perform useful cause-effect analysis, and to use AI to help us scrutinize the analysis. And using AI, basically what it means is that we have the formal structured approach, and we have the ability to do the cause-effect analysis, and that's because we understand cause-effect logic. But using the AI is going to really help us improve our logic. And the more we improve our logic, the more effective we become in communicating with the AI. So this is sort of the virtuous cycle that we will get out of it. The AI will help us to think more clearly, and thinking more clearly will help us in communicating with AI and getting better analysis and better decisions out of it. So, and the big thing here is to understand how the AI, it thinks and it works differently from us because it doesn't have bias. We also have to be careful when communicating with it. Sometimes it responds with just total bullshit, and we have to be able to identify that. And we have to use structured approach to use it. So this is basically the key takeaway, I think, in all of this. And I hope this is something that you will find interesting when you start exploring it, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or just want to discuss or anything. And I guess we have some questions already. So thank you.